Welcome back guys to another video and this is the part 2 of top 20 cyber सिक्योरिटी क्वेश्चंस जो कि इंटरव्यूज में पूछे जाते हैं। अगर आपने अभी तक पार्ट 1 नहीं देखा तो ऊपर एक आई बटन आ रहा होगा, उस पर क्लिक करके आप पार्ट 1 भी देख सकते हो। सो विदाउट फर्दर डू लेट्स डाइव राइट इनटू द वीडियो एंड मेक श्योर कि आप लाइक बटन जरूर दबा दो, उससे मुझे मोटिवेशन मिलती है टू मेक मोर सच कंटेंट जो आप लोगों को हेल्प करे। सो लेट्स गो। This is a very interesting question, and if you know the theory behind it, then you can explain it easily. We have already performed this attack. So if you have already performed this attack very well, then this should be fairly easy for you. Explain what is buffer overflow. So buffer overflow is probably the best known form of software security vulnerability. They are not easy to discover, and even when it is discovered, it is generally extremely difficult to exploit. Why? Because it deals with a lot of assembly code. We have to see which pointers, etc. So basically in this type of an attack, the attacker tries to access the memory which he is not allowed to and tries to gain shell to execute commands on the system. This you must relate if you have performed the attack that we have discussed in this course in the buffer overflow module. Many memory manipulation functions in C and C++ do not perform bound checking and can easily overwrite the allocated bounds of the buffer they operate upon. So even the bounded functions such as strncpy can cause vulnerabilities when used incorrectly. Next question is, what types of tools are out there for packet sniffing? Whenever packet sniffing comes to question, you should relate to Wireshark. And Wireshark is probably the most common packet sniffing tool. This program can help you find odd traffic across network or identify a program that is sending traffic silently from the host. So this type of tools can also be used in forensics. This is also a very widely asked question because people usually get confused between authentication and authorization. What is the difference between authentication and authorization? So first we'll discuss points about authentication. Authentication, it determines whether users are who they claim to be. Second, it challenges the user to validate their credentials, example through passwords, answer security question or facial recognition. Third point is, it is usually done before authorization. So authentication is the first step, authorization comes later. What are some of the examples? Logging onto Facebook. And it can be any website. Just for example's sake, I took Facebook. Now let's discuss authorization. So it determines what users can and cannot access. It verifies whether access is allowed through policies and rules or not. Third point is, it is usually done after authentication. So one of the example is, after successfully logging onto Facebook, you are authorized to perform some actions like adding a post to your profile, etc., which you were not authorized to do before logging in. Now this part we have already discussed, still I'll go through it very quickly. What are the phases of a network penetration test, or what are the 5 steps in methodology of a hacker? So the phase 1 is reconnaissance. It is a process of collecting data about the target. It can be performed actively or passively. In this phase, you learn more and more about the target, business and its operation. Activities include identifying the target, finding out the target IP address range, network, domain, mail server, DNS records, etc. So basically we are just gathering information in this first step. Second phase is scanning. This is another crucial phase of penetration test. In this phase, scanning has been done to identify vulnerabilities in the network and software and operating system used by the device. After this activity, the pen testers learn about services running, open ports, firewall vulnerabilities, etc. There are a lot of tools for this, both open source and paid, and by now you must know that majorly we are talking about Nmap here. Third part is gaining access. In this phase, the pen testers started executing the attack by gaining access to vulnerable devices and server. This can be done by using different kind of tools. Fourth point is, after we have the access, now we want to maintain the access, because sometimes it can happen that services can crash and we can lose our access. So in this phase, the pen tester tries to extract as much data as he can and also remain stealthy. That means hidden while maintaining the access. The last phase is covering tracks. It basically means that whatever mess you did in the system, you need to clean that up. So in this phase, the pen tester takes all the necessary steps to hide the intrusion and possible controls left behind for future visits. He shall also remove all kinds of logs, uploaded backdoors, and anything related to the attack. So we have to hide all the evidences that we were once here in the system. So yeah, these are the 5 phases. Coming to the 15th question, how do you test for blind SQL injection? Now everyone knows about SQL injection, how to test, but interviewer can sometimes ask that what is blind SQL injection? So the answer should be very simple and straightforward, that you are looking for time delays, because if you are entering a normal payload, we cannot identify the blind SQL injection. So we will go for time delays. So for example, if MySQL is being used, we can use commands, we can use queries such as sleep 10, which will cause a delay of 10 seconds. The response is observed after 10 seconds. Next question is, this is a question which is generally asked to individuals and there is no particular answer to this. So question is, which is your favorite kind of attack? So let's say you say XSS. Now you have to give a brief description. What is it? How it can be prevented and how it is done? Why you like the attack? There can be many follow-up questions related to attack and any other sort of questions that the interviewer thinks is appropriate pertaining to that attack. So this answer needs to be pre-prepared before going to the interview. This next question is, what kind of methods are there in HTTP request? So this is a very generic question and you must be familiar with it now because you have seen a lot of requests. So let's quickly see what kind of methods are supported. First one is get. The get method is used to retrieve information from the given server using a given URI. Request using get should only retrieve data and should have no other effect on the data. Second comes head. The response is exactly same as get, but there is no body. Only the headers in the response can be observed. Third comes post. A post request is used to send data to the server. For example, customer information, file upload, etc. Next comes put method. So sometimes you have to upload an image, then put method can be used. So sometimes you have to upload an image or some document, then put method can be used to upload such stuff. Delete is very obvious that it deletes the resource. Connect, it establishes a tunnel to the server identified by a given URI. Next comes options header. Basically it tells that which all methods are supported. So last in this list is trace. The trace method is used to echo the contents of HTTP request back to the requester, which can be used for debugging purposes at the time of development. Now 18th question is, list the benefits that can be provided by an intrusion detection system. Now don't get scared by this question because intrusion detection system is nothing but IDS. We have already covered this in our course, so you must be familiar with this, so you can easily answer this. It helps in identifying security incidents and DOS attacks, denial of services, checks for unexpected and abstract behavior of the traffic. It stops cross-site scripting, SQL injection and other kind of attacks. Last but not the least, it protects vulnerable assets by providing temporary patches for known vulnerabilities. Okay, let's see what the next question is. How does SSL and TLS works? So these are the 5 steps that you need to explain to the interviewer. The first step is the user initiates the connection by typing the website's address. For example, you visit google.com. The browser initiates SSL or TLS communication by sending a message to the website's server. Second step is the website server then sends back the public key or the certificate to the user's browser. Third step is, now the user browser checks for that public key or certificate. If it is okay and fine, it creates a symmetric key and sends it back to the website's server. If the certificate is not okay, the communication fails. If it is fine, then it proceeds. So step number 4, on receiving the symmetric key, the website's server sent the key and encrypted the requested data And finally, the user's browser decrypts the content using a symmetric key which completes the SSL or TLS handshake. The user can then see contents as now the connection is established. So just visualize this and understand this properly, because this can also be asked during the interviews. Finally, the last question which every penetration tester must know, and this is often overlooked, and interviewers ask this question because people usually get confused between these three terms. What is the difference between threat, vulnerability and risk? So firstly, looking at threat is anything that can exploit a vulnerability intentionally or accidentally and obtain damage or destroy an asset. What is vulnerability? Weakness or gaps in a security program that can be exploited by the threats to gain unauthorized access to an asset. Lastly, what is risk? The potential for loss, damage or destruction of an asset as a result of a threat exploiting a vulnerability. Now, tip here to remember is that risk is a combination of vulnerability plus threat plus the asset we are trying to protect. Okay. So these were the 20 questions according to me which are mostly asked in interviews, and every fresher should know at least these 20 questions. Of course, there are a lot more questions that you need to learn, but these 20 questions are very important. So you need to have proper understanding for this. Thank you for watching this video.
Nowhere to go, so far from home. Is this what giving up feels like? I don't know. Tell me, have I lost my mind? So I pray